It's going to be a short introduction because I think you both know both of our speeches today, but my intent today was, one, to have some of the faculty who have not spoken for a while get a chance to talk to the department, and two, really to talk about one of the most, if not, they'll probably make the case, most important crops in the state. There you go. And one reason Chris is not in it because he's had a chance to talk lately, right? Yeah. And we'll have some more problems in the future. So I asked Ray and Jimmy Henning, Ray Smith, Jimmy Henning, to come today. And I'm not really going to do much of an introduction because they have 100 years to cover in 50 minutes. That's 30 seconds apiece.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. And it is a pleasure to be here and to talk about forages. And yes, we will make a case why forages is important. Forages are important. And many people have commented on this, does the sum of our years equal 100? Well, no, but if you factor in how many years an administrative year is worth, it probably exceeds 100. But let's get moving. Of course, you know, we're forage specialists in the bluegrass state, so it's no pressure, right? It is a high-profile job, and that's good. Of course, it's bluegrass, not because it's blue, but because of the purple tint that it gets, or the field gets, because of the purple seed heads that form in the spring. You know, and of course, this is the signature industry, at least for us, a lot of the time, horses, and it's certainly on bluegrass, and that's what people think of when they think of forages in Kentucky often. But it's very diverse. From yak in Menifee County, soil conservation, of course, horses. Chad will even take acres of corn, you know. The small grains are used, and of course the clovers that form such an important part of our history. Quickly ticking down the value of these things, it depends on the year, but equine after chickens is the most economically significant industry that uses forage crops at about $1 billion. Beef cattle at $740 million. This does fluctuate a lot based on the price of calves. Hay sales, and this is a hard number to find, but when you do find it documented, you'll find it above $150 million and up. This one is from 2015, the Kentucky Department of Agriculture numbers. Dairy, and you got to say that dairy's having a problem, but in terms of the longevity and the profitability of the industry, but it's viable, and at $166 million. Sheep and goats, and they don't have a number, but there are about 100,000 animals, and about, even more importantly, about 6,000 producers across the state that raise sheep and goats. So my part, I want to talk about under the first 80 years or so since 1920 of forage extension. And when you talk about forage extension, cannot be an extension only talk, because without research and without the work that this department does and other departments do, we have nothing to talk about. Okay, have nothing to talk about. So I'm going to theme it, my part, people, producers, and progress, and try to tell you a story about this department, forage extension, and forage livestock extension as a whole. Okay, you got to start with Dr. Ian Fergus, and he came here in 1920 as an associate field scientist, or associate. I mean, it read like a staff position. 1920. Okay, he was hired to do red clover improvement and trying to make it last long, and he did work on that, and he did accomplish that. But he's known for this, Kentucky 31 called fescue. And of course, this may be the most frequently told story about Kentucky fescue, and the Menifee County hillside where Dr. Fergus was driving back from he was judging a sorghum contest. And at the sorghum contest, one of the producers said, "Have you heard about the good grass that Mr. Suter is growing on his farm?" And so, no, I didn't know about that good grass. He went to the hillside to this farm, collected seed, and it eventually became the variety Kentucky 31 because he found it in 1931. the variety, or Kentucky 31 was then as a variety, once it was almost done, then Bill Johnstone was given the task of taking that seed and getting it out with farmers and developing a plan for its use and spread. And because it was so well adapted that, excuse me, that wasn't a problem, getting it to be used and spread. But he did have a Green Pastures Advisory Committee, and I mention it because I think it's a precursor, if not directly, at least in the spirit of the Kentucky Forage and Grassland Council that I will mention later, and the importance that producers have served in the accomplishments that I think, I will say for myself, that I have made. Now, you've got to try to picture Kentucky before Kentucky 31. And we only have, we didn't have smartphones then, so we don't have the picture base that we do now. But you can find in the history of the College of Agriculture a specific reference to the fact that people in Western Kentucky, in particular, only had red top as a forage, and red top's not very good, not very consistent. And we had gullies and we had erosion. So in fact, one early specialist said before Kentucky 31, Kentucky pastures were sagegrass, sassafras, sawbriars, and sweet gum. Okay. And then, of course, if you think back, well, some of us are old enough to remember when you begin to know what fescue was and when you saw it. I saw it in the 60s in Georgia. And it is the most widely grown species in the Southeast. Kentucky 31, the most widely grown variety in the Southeast. A remarkable impact from that hillside in Menifee County, and realize that that field was not seeded by Mr. Suter. He bought the farm in 1887, and it was there. Interesting. All right. I want to get into the people side just a little bit more and give you a little bit of a chronology. This is not everybody, but these are kind of the people that, if you go plus or minus what I remember and what I saw happen, you start with Bill Templeton, who started in 1939, Bob Buckner, 1948, Norman Taylor, 53, Tim Taylor, 55, Warren Thompson, who I would say I consider that to be maybe the first extension specialist for forages by name, Lowell Bush, 1966, and then you get into Chuck Dougherty, Mike Collins, myself, Tim Phillips, and others coming on after that. But I do want to mention, in particular, these four individuals because they really set the bar. This is Bill Templeton, Warren Thompson, Tim Taylor, and Norman Taylor. The gentlemen in the back picture were such a, well, not unified, because they were probably as politically diverse as we are today. But they were called the Triple T group. Thompson, Templeton, Taylor. And Norm, of course, is in the same era. But both Norm and Bill Templeton were published in the first volume of Crop Science, the first volume. So these are people that were really at the cutting edge, the leading edge of their science in the day. Buckner was the fescue program after Fergus. Of course, Norm was legume breeder. And then you get into what I would call the first shift into what I call modern extension. This is Gary Lacefield on the left and Ken Evans on the right. And looking back at these old pictures, I realized that we don't look the same. I can assure you. My daughter, when she saw my wedding picture, wanted to know, who is that in there with mommy? True story. And so in my view, Gary Lacefield and Ken Evans, and probably more, as much Gary as anything, defined the modern extension specialist from what they did here. And that would be high quality educational materials, collaborative work across multiple departments, extensive writing, popular press, and extension, number of pubs. And I didn't get it counted, but I bet you we have as many forage related pubs as any other discipline in the number series. And we'll talk more about themed conferences too. Well, here's one. Gary's, one of his signature events was the Alfalfa Conference. And this is the Cave City Convention Center. And look at the title, Dr. Lacefield's 11th Alfalfa Conference. So Gary was a force, a charismatic force. And I joined in 1990. Of course, that's Warren Thompson in the middle, and one of the producers I'll mention a little later, Mike Collins and Tim Phillips. And my job is to kind of get us up to the early 2000s. And so this is going to be the people that are going to form the story I'll tell from here on out. Now, this is a picture, and I did my best to figure out when that was shot. And it's got to be late 60s or early 1970s, okay? And I show you that, not to make fun of anybody, but since we're looking, there's Scott Smith, and Dennis Egley's in the front row right there. But my point at this stage of this little seminar is to talk about the fact that our forage work has never been about the individuals doing it, but about the group that is supporting us. And I went through and circled in this slide all the people that are developing the research help that we need to make a difference. Okay? All right, let's keep moving. A little bit about the producers, not worth, I mean, I will not spend the time on them that they deserve, but I will just say that the Forage and Grassland Council is our formal connection to producers. But the leadership of producers, Larry Jeffries, who helped work on the John Deere power till seeder when it was UK Blue, not John Deere Green. Okay, so that he goes back that far. Larry helped us with fine-tuning no-till. The gentleman in the bottom picture, left to right, Johnny Elliott, Warren Thompson, J.B. Holtzclaw, and Dan Grigson. You know Warren. On the right, Dan Grigson's the county agent. But I mentioned, well, J.B., the third one from your left, was grazing corn in the 1980s. And I heard about that when I went to work in the 80s, and I thought, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. Well, not when you see J.B. do it. And the gentleman on the left had the first field of grazing alfalfa in Kentucky, alpha graze. Then you have a gentleman that, in fact, our grazing calendar is dedicated to, Russell Hacklett. And Russell was a self-proclaimed grass farmer. And Russell was not always warm and fuzzy to us because he would really challenge you. And Tim in the room, Tim Phillips. Yes, I mean we've all got the Russell scars. You know, he would talk to you. You know, but Russell would in the same breath would tell you he loves you. You know. Now let's talk about progress, and as I wind down my part and turn it over to Ray. You got to start with Kentucky 31, and the span of Kentucky 31 pretty well covers the whole span of the time I'm covering. Red clover, Kinland red clover, released in the 40s, and still does well today. It's not perfect as a variety, but you can still find certified Kinland, and it still is in the top group yield-wise in our tests. I put the comprehensive cow-calf demonstrations in here because this is a collaboration with animal science that predates by a long ways the Beef IRM group and the Kentucky Beef Network that we have today. Johnstone Tall Fescue, a collaboration between agronomy and animal science. It's Bob Buckner and Jim Bowling. And of course, Norm, the venerable Norm Taylor, who had been working longer than I had been breeding throughout my career. And we got Freedom red clover, a low hairiness trait red clover, and his Kentucky Pride crimson selection, and numerous germplasms. And we'll mention some other things later. You got to talk about Tim Taylor and the no-till demonstration work, and Ed Smith and Ag Engineering, trying to fine-tune this incorporation of legumes into tall fescue that I still worked on when I got here. Mainly because farmers were not having good results, and so we needed to find out why. If you look at just the scope of work for Gary Lacefield in his career, because that's what this time in the, from 1980 to 2015, this does overlap with what Ray will tell you, but if you look at I'll say the first of the modern extension specialists, and certainly somebody that anybody in this country would say, Gary Lacefield defined what it meant to be a professional extension forage specialist. A big library. He wrote a monthly forage news column from 1978 to 2015. 36 years, 434 issues. And if we were ever late, I guarantee you it was my fault. Alfalfa Conference, 35 years. He started the Kentucky Grazing Conference with Ray, Heart of America Grazing Conference, and led the development of special topics courses, Alfalfa and Pesky, that became national intensive training courses. A little bit about some of the things that I think signify the great partnerships. We discovered that farmers were not adopting the good red clover varieties, even though we had the data. And so we had set out to change our trials, and Gene, we still use common medium reds in trials today in order to have the comparisons there that farmers need to make the decisions. And what we found was that, well, sadly, only 10% of farmers were using something good. That was embarrassing, right? But by the time we had been able to get through a cycle of demonstrations and put more yield data in front of them, we moved that number to 40%. And it's one of the rare times where you can know that you moved the adoption of varieties from a number to a bigger number. And because of the scope of that, how much seed was sold, I can show you that that's worth $24 million a year at a 40% adoption versus 10. Grazing tolerance studies. This got me a quick ride to the farm with Orrin Little, because this became a mud lot, and that's ironworks. And the president's wife didn't like that and said, Orrin Little, your faculty are tearing up the farm. And Orrin says, let's go take a ride. And we went to this, and the long end, the short of it is, Gene, that's how we got land in the middle of the park. They got us off the road. We literally, some of us, not me, wrote the book. Norm, The World of Clovers. Mike Collins, many volumes of the Forages book. Gary Lacefield, one of the few extension people who did write the book they said they were going to write in retirement. And the last thing I'll say is we were very highly involved as a part of a team in resolving the mare reproductive loss syndrome problem. I remember getting the call from Vet Science who said, this is not an infectious disease, it is your pastures. Well, this is 2001. I still consider myself green as grass. And you start down a path of trying to figure out what caused the problem. And it was high profile, high enough profile that some labs would not analyze the samples we took from pastures for fear of litigation. It was a tough time. But my point is that this mobilized the entire college. At one point, there were 100 people working on this problem. And specifically in agronomy, I was making the farm visits and trying to figure out what was going on. But you know, we would get together in the morning in 222, and we would have most of that group that you saw circled, or some of that group there. And they looked at me and they said, would you like us to go with you? And I said, yes, I would. We took 2 van loads one day, and we went around all the farms we'd been visiting, looking at poisonous plants and all the things I didn't know enough about to be sure I knew what I was looking at. You got Lowell Bush and everybody. I'm thinking, Tim, you were here. Tim was here. Mike Collins and myself. And we eliminated a lot of things that day, right? Mike Collins went with me the next day, and that's where we found the field of mares that still were intact. They still had their foals and no wild cherry trees. Now, as I turn this over to Ray, this was not a happy thing for the entomologists whenever we hypothesized that eastern tent caterpillar were the cause. And in fact, well, Mike Collins had a bet with Dan Potter over who was going to be right. And Mike, well, the longest time, it was a bear claw was the prize, Tim. Remember that? Mike put it on a plaque and put it on the wall in 222. Okay? So there you go. 20 minutes worth of 80 years worth of forage extension, really forage research extension service, the department, the college. Right? It's all yours.
Thanks, Jimmy. Great overview, great background. For those of you not familiar, the mare reproductive loss syndrome, about a third of the foal crop, the thoroughbred foal crop, was lost. So during that year, or maybe 2 seasons, Jimmy, or maybe just 1 season?
Well, it happened both years, but they lost a third in 2000.
Yeah. So a $300 million loss, plus they didn't know what it was. So it was quite the catastrophe and quite the success story for University of Kentucky, solving what had happened. And we can tell you more if you're interested in exactly how the tent caterpillar relates with that. Oh, Jimmy, I did a scary calculation. I added up my years in my career, including grad school, and yours and Chris's. That came up with 99 years. So we are close to 100 if you add it up.
There you go.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. So I'm going to take 2005, when I started at the University of Kentucky, to the current. And I'm giving you a test. I give this test often in meetings, and it's which management is best. You look at continuous grazing on the left versus rotational grazing on the right. This is an simulation of what would happen in a pasture. This is both an academic test and a test to see if you're awake. Okay, which is the better pasture if this was representing the pasture? The one on the left or the one on the right?
Right.
Okay, and everyone except one lady has always answered the one on the right. One lady, though, said, I like the one on the left because I have these fat ponies and they're always gaining weight, and I don't really want something that grows very much. So one of our goals in extension, and I'll mention in just a second, is we want to help county agents help producers in the state. I mean, our real goal is helping producers in the state. There's something, Chad, close to 80,000 farms in Kentucky. Close to 40,000 of those are livestock farms. I mean, in fact, if you added all the livestock together, I guess it would be more than that. So things like this that can help graphically show what we're trying to teach people. The only difference in those 2 plants is this was cut to 1 inch once a week for a month. This was cut to 3.5 inches, the proper grazing height we recommend, and then allowed to rest and cut again at the end of that month. So that would represent a rotational grazing with a rest period, not too close of grazing. This was grazed close, like often happens in pastures, and on a weekly basis are representing continuous grazing. I won't show this video clip. Gabriel Roberts, my technician, has put together a number of other time-lapse videos simply showing what's the best seeding depth to seed forages, and I usually get the correct answer when I show this video. Partly I'm not showing the video because it's a bit boring, because for a long time in the video nothing's growing, so it's a little bit boring. Okay, I went ahead and put this up at the beginning rather than the end because I wanted to make sure that I recognize people that are involved in forage extension. Jimmy's already mentioned Gary Lacefield, myself, Chris, and Jimmy. I put here Tim as an adjunct because Tim doesn't have the extension appointment. But Tim, I don't think he's ever failed when I have a good photograph of a weed or a grass to identify, or at least get me close. And so the way it happens is I'm out in the field and a producer says, what is this? And I act like I'm a real smart academic, and I take a picture, and I act like I'm studying it, but I'm really texting Tim the picture, and Tim texts back what it is, and then I act real smart. Well, I try to always give you credit, Tim, but maybe sometimes I don't. Tom Keene is now 100% hemp, but has worked a lot in the Forage program on a number of initiatives. I'll mention a couple of those as we go through. Krista Lay is a soft-funded but an excellent job with her work in the pasture evaluation program. Gene Olson manages the largest variety testing program in the country. Forage variety testing. Gabriel Roberts is a technician in the program. Laura Streer works in Krista's capacity in pasture evaluation. You see at the top, though, I've got county agents, I've got producers, because to us, those are the key personnel, and we learn a lot more often from the producers than we feel like we're telling them. There's been graduate students that have been involved in, obviously in research projects, but often tied into the extension. We've had a number of Asbury University students that have worked with us in their senior research projects, interns in the equine programs, in that program. Visiting scientist, Christy Forsythe was Gary Lacewell's long-term secretary, now working under Chris. And I went ahead and mentioned, I was running out, I was trying to forget a person's name, but the weeds group, the grains group, the soils group, we have close contacts and publications that we work on together, often being in contact with these groups as it overlaps. I'm thinking in weeds, there's a lot of pasture weeds that JD comes up with good recommendations to handle. A lot of work in cover crops now that overlap with forages, or many of those are forages. Things like corn solids, the grain group does this testing for that, and obviously a lot of overlap with soils. Appreciate some of the USDA backroom folks being here. As I got to thinking about projects and things that we've used in extension, and actually when the government was shut down, it seemed like there was nobody up in our hall. So this made me realize just how close it ties that we have and want to continue. Rebecca's grassland ecology group, and I could keep going on from there, and that's not even counting overlaps with animal science and ag economics and biosystems and entomology and plant pathology. Now, I'm throwing this in so I don't forget it. Our Forage Workers Tour, Jimmy, has happened for 30 or 40 years.
Yes.
Where the extension, research, grad students, technicians, and others pile in a couple of vans and travel around the state, different parts of the state for a couple of days. Here's the yak farm that Jimmy showed a picture of earlier. That'll be May 7th and 8th. We sent out a reminder about the dates a couple of days ago. If you didn't get that, then let us know. We'll add you to the mailing list, because we'd love for anyone to go. You don't have to have a direct link in with Forages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through several livestock species, and then I'm going to go through some just independent projects. Because remember when I was a grad student, Carl Hubbard was on my committee, and he said, forages really have no value except as they go through an animal. And it really got me thinking. It's easy to be focused and kind of with blinders on with working forages, but if it doesn't work well, it doesn't help an animal, it's not palatable to an animal, it's not high quality, digestible, then it doesn't matter. I'll start with beef because, as I mentioned, we've got close to 40,000 beef cattle farms in the state. We're the largest cow state, cattle numbers east of the Mississippi. So I'm going to go through some things that we've worked on in this area. One of the biggest programs is the Master Cattleman Program. In fact, there's a series of programs that are merged together into what we call the Beef IRM project. That's been going on, Jimmy, since about 2001 or so. This comes with money from the Kentucky Ag Development Fund, in essence, the tobacco settlement money. Chris now is the Forage Committee member on the Beef IRM Committee. But we've got a series of programs. The Master Cattleman started with producers would sign up and they would go to 10 evening sessions. I think right now it's 8. So it's quite the commitment, but then they can get a sign that looks about like this, put it on their gate or on their barn or something like that, showing that they're a master cattleman. And farmers are very proud to show that they've gone through that training. And so the Forages is a part of that. Another program we call the Master Stalker Program. I very carefully pronounced that because my wife, when I first said it, she said the Master Stalker Program. That's kind of bad. So a stalker would be a weaned calf that is off the cow, not milking anymore, but it's growing. And so there's a fairly big industry in Kentucky in taking animals, particularly on pasture through the spring, summer, and fall, and getting good growth on fairly cheap feed source, and then they would go to the stockyards or go to finishing. And obviously forages can be a very important part of that. We have our Master Granger program. Chris is now the principal investigator with this program, but for a number of years it's been under the coordination of Donna Emerald Phillips, Jeff Limcooler, and myself, Gary, Jimmy, and now Chris is on board with this. This is the website with that program. Several things come under the Master Grazer program that fits in very closely with what we're doing in Forages. If you would like a calendar or you just want to see some of a good synopsis of things that we're doing, we've got a copy there in the back of this Master Grazer calendar. And you say, well, I don't need another calendar, or I use the one on my phone, but the real goal of this is giving tips each month that farmers can look at, cattle producers can look at, horse or goat and sheep, either one, and say, these are the things that I need to be doing this time of year. And we give a lot of credit to Jimmy for a lot of the photographs that go into this. We have a Kentucky grazing school. Jimmy, we're getting close to 25 years of having Kentucky grazing schools, a 2-day grazing school, an intensive program where producers come for classroom training, but a lot of what they're doing is out in the field. They're learning how to measure forages, they're learning how to set up a grazing system, they're learning about how growth, how their management affects the growth of the grass, which obviously affects the growth of the animal. We have this coming up in Princeton, April 23rd and 24th. And you'll notice that we're not quite finished with the building, so we're meeting at the Central Presbyterian Church there, which we're thankful that they're providing space for us. Chris, when he came to Kentucky, he started, starting last year, Kentucky fencing school. Now you might say, why are forage people working with fences and teach people how to build fences? If you don't have fences, you can't control grazing. You can't control how the plants grow. You obviously can't have control over your production of your animals. So this has been a popular program. You all did this for a number of years, Chris, in Virginia. And we have a limit of 30 people because a lot of it's hands-on. I'm particularly excited about this because we need a nice, strong fence between our plots and Rebecca's plots at the farm. And so the school is going to build it for us, Rebecca. It's going to be probably a lot better than if we had built it. We will have experts advising them. They're not just going to string up fence forever. I went ahead and put this because Gary, for many years, wrote an article in Cow Country News, and Chris has now taken that over, monthly column in Cow Country News. I think, Chris, it's somewhere around 10,000 or more per issue. It's all the members of Kentucky Cattlemen Association. Jimmy, as he's come back into extension, is writing every 2-week articles for the Farmer's Pride, 16,000 plus per issue. So that's been a very effective way to get practical information, a couple of page type articles in descriptions and diagrams out to producers in the state. Someone told me, Chris, I have to, true admission, someone told me they read all of my columns in Cow Country News. And I just thanked them. I should have been more honest. In the equine area, now Jimmy talked about the problems with MLRS. The horse industry has been important in Kentucky for a long time, particularly the thoroughbred industry from a cash value, but there was not a lot of connection between the university, except for the research at the Gluck Center, and equine. And in fact, many of the thoroughbred farms, they kind of, you may not know the history, but it was kind of a us against them type thing, and the university doesn't really help us. And with Jimmy's efforts and others' effort, when I came in 2005, we were just starting up the equine initiative. It's now equine programs. And so we've got a lot of links right now. So in Kentucky, there's about 250,000 horses. Many people would think to themselves, well, it's just central Kentucky. But But across the state, even in far western Kentucky, this would be, inventory would stand for the number of horses, and this would be the number of farms that have horses. So it's spread throughout the state. It's a very important industry. And we're working hard to not just be providing extension advice to horse owners and horse farm managers in the thoroughbred area around Lexington, but also throughout the state. We started, in fact, Jimmy, I guess it was probably your idea that you moved into administration and passed down to me when I started. We started a program to evaluate pastures, tell farms how much, what are the species, what are the weeds, what's the amount of tall fescue, how toxic is that tall fescue, what can they do about it. I started that back in 2005. We've now, during that period of time, done very comprehensive evaluations of 228 farms, 2,500 individual pastures. These would range in size from half acre to 30 acres in size, almost 50,000 farm acres covering 25 counties. That's been a very effective extension delivery. It's also been a great student training with the undergraduate students, but even a number of graduate students have had research projects tied in with the evaluations in the data we're getting from this program. Here's just an example of students that have worked in the program in 2016 and 2017, monitoring the species composition in the field. I mentioned earlier, but 27 Asbury students have done their senior research project with me. A nice thing about that is that they've got to write a paper, they've got to give a presentation. Many of them presented at the Kentucky Academy of Science, so it's been a way for us to get information out there into that academic community. University of Kentucky, we've had 14 interns working through this pasture evaluation program and 7 students from other schools. And one of our big things in both the beef cattle program and in equine and others is different events, different extension events. Every year for the last 12 years, I think, we've had a field day in the summer on a different horse farm. And we have a winter program called Pastures Please. Now, I would put up about 12 of these major programs if I was talking about the beef cattle industry. You can look on our website to see some of those. But we didn't have a lot of this type of program, Jimmy, I would say so in the past years. And so these have been very effective, and the county agents have really gotten aboard, done a lot of recruitment to get horse owners and horse farm managers to these programs. Who's heard of the Bluegrass Equine Digest? A few people in here? Okay, it's getting information. It's a monthly newsletter, really almost more of a magazine, getting research information from University of Kentucky and extension information out across the Kentucky, across the country. Actually, I think there's about 50 countries now that are subscribed to this. We've written about 34 forage-related articles. Every month it goes to 35,000 subscribers, plus additional through social media. So that's been a very effective way that we've been able to get extension information out. And last of all, I meant to bring a copy of it, but Jimmy and Krista and I are co-authors in this recent published book, Horse Pasture Management. What about dairy? Jimmy mentioned the dairy industry, and as in many states, the number of dairy farms has declined. The number of dairy animals has declined, though milk production per animal has increased. So we still have a strong dairy industry in the country. But since Kentucky had many small to medium-sized dairy farms, those have been the ones that have kind of dropped off the map as far as not being able to make it economically in the current environment or in the environment of the last number of years. But we are working closely. In fact, we're working with any dairy farm that needs that information. But we've had several projects with the close to 40 organic dairies in Kentucky. In an organic dairy, they have more of a contract price with the company, and so they don't have the huge fluctuations in the income that they can get. And right now, the organic dairy would get a little over twice as much for their milk as a conventional dairy. And so even though it's a little harder, particularly with things like animal health, to produce the milk, it is a more profitable or sustainable program. And so here's an example of a project that we've been working on with the University of Tennessee. I'll put up the next slide just to show you some of the collaborators that we've had with that project. Chris and I did a training with Organic Valley here at Melvin Troyer's farm going back in October of last year. And so this particular project, our main focus is what forages work best. We've looked at cool season legumes, so this is for an organic dairy. The interesting thing is, I hate to even say organic dairy because a forage is a forage, and growing it organically is a little harder, not having things like herbicides, but the management that you would need and the quality of that, the yield are quite similar. So what we're learning overlaps. So we're working with alfalfa, crimson clover, red clover, annual ryegrass, orchard grass, tall fescue, cowpeas and annual aspidisa and warm season grasses, crabgrass and sorghum sudan grass, and looking at which combinations of these, which systems of these, not just in small plots that we've had at the organic farm there on the organic south farm, but also out on the actual producer's farm, you know, which are going to work best. And have published several things on this at national meetings. Put up one other thing here too, because there's a collaborative project with Cornell and the University of Minnesota looking at low lignin alfalfa. So this has been a very focused research project, but it's great to have this kind of research information that we generate and that you all generate to deliver to extension programming. In fact, in case I forget it at the end, one of my hopes and goals is that we would do a better job, Chris and Jimmy and I, at getting research information that some of you all are doing that relates to forages out into extension programming. I always, probably every week, I'm thinking about a project maybe David McNair is working on. How could we put that into extension? Just letting people know. So I ask you, if you know of something, let us know. And again, it's kind of an onus on us to be in touch with you as well with that. Small ruminants, goats and sheep. Tomorrow we've got the Small Ruminant Conference. Tom Keene has been very involved in this with the projects that he was doing in quicksand. Michael Flight, Isabel Kagan, Dr. Bush, Glenn Aiken, did some very novel and really groundbreaking work using goats to look at the benefit of red clover to overcome some of the toxicity of tall fescue. If you're not familiar with this work, I think we've talked about it here in this meeting before. But you can see vessels that are constricted from ergobating and tall fescue they've proven in goats and in cattle as well that those vessels can be dilated. I think, Michael, you'd probably say in a very short period of time by some of the compounds like biotannin A in red clover. In fact, I'll talk about this a little bit when I'm at the meetings tomorrow. So those are main livestock in Kentucky. What about hay production? This is a slide when Tom Keene first came on board at the University of Kentucky, where he was heading up a hay marketing program. Chris brought with him from Virginia Tech a project with USDA NIPA to develop, as you put it here, an alfalfa information exchange. So this is now on our website. It's one of the links on the Forage website. And so we're glad to have that information available, not just obviously in Kentucky and Virginia, but across the country. The Alfalfa Storage Forage Conference was just yesterday. My head's spinning with all the meetings that we're having right now. This is, as you see at the top, the 38th annual one. Gary had the Alfalfa Conference for 35 years. We went ahead and decided to expand it a little bit and include all stored forages. So I'm just going to list a few of the things that we're involved in, programs, projects that don't fit in exactly with those different categories that I gave you before. I mentioned, and Jimmy mentioned, our Forage website. I don't tell people where to go anymore for that. I just say Google KY Forages. I don't tell them, Tim, to say UK Forages because they'll get some really interesting things from the United Kingdom. So I try to say KY Forages. Most of producers in rural Kentucky don't really catch what I'm saying when I say don't put UK Forages. We've got events, all of these tabs, like for example, the Alfalfa tab was what I just showed you with all the resources that Chris has lined up. We've also got Forage News, a monthly publication. Jimmy mentioned how many years Gary had done that. You can sign up and get that Forage News. That's something that we had just started the last few years to make a lot easier for people to link to that and get that downloaded as an email. We still do a mail out of about 80. Some people would say, why do you bother with that? But just one example, about 50 of those are Amish and older Mennonite that don't have email. And so they do need a mail copy if they're going to get one. And several other older producers appreciate that. Now, I want to really highlight the YouTube channel that's KY Forages. You can just Google YouTube KY Forages. This is something that Chris started at University of Kentucky. And Chris, you have 1,380 subscribers, 65,000 views annually, 1.5 million minutes of watch time. You know, people say that people aren't going to watch them for more than a minute or 3 minutes. What's the average, Chris, on this?
11 minutes.
So people, in essence, a lot of what Chris does is record presentations like the Alfalfa conference yesterday. So people can go to that, the individual presentations, and they can listen to that whole presentation as if they were there. And a guy was joking yesterday, and he said, my wife hears your voice, Chris, and she says, oh, that's him again, because he's listening to these different meetings and presentations that Chris is giving. I think that was a compliment, Chris, that he was giving you. I mentioned Gene coordinating the forage variety testing program, largest. I think it's now the largest program in the U.S. If it's not, it's amongst the top 3. In fact, one of the seed companies yesterday asked me, he knows Kentucky's program was good. He was trying to find out other ones. And with some recent retirements in places like Wisconsin, I was having a hard time coming up with any in the eastern U.S. That had anywhere the size of program that we have. Jimmy, I wanted to get my own picture in a red clover field, so we did a little video talking about the value of improved clovers. This is something that is on our Forage website and our Master Granger website. We work really hard, and I know that the other groups in Kentucky, the other commodity groups, work hard to get out things like the wheat yield information, the corn yield information, but getting out the summary of the forage variety test. We have so many different forage species, though. There's about 13 individual publications that Gene puts together each year. So we've been doing this long-term summary. And it doesn't give us detailed data, but it is an easy way for someone to take one publication or go to one link on the website and come up with the yield and the grazing tolerance across a full range of forages. Maybe not every one that can be grown in the state, but the major ones. Chris started working with Carrie. I guess Carrie got the funding, Chris, and then you all been able to tie into interns. Chris had 2 interns this last summer. I'm working on very focused projects. Those interns, like Hunter, presented at the American Forage and Grassland Council. Chris did about a 5-minute video recording of Hunter explaining what he did. So not only do they have the experience, but it's getting that information out there. And we work closely with researchers and extension people across the eastern U.S., in fact, several from the western U.S., and giving information and resources for farmers to be able to plant and know how to plant novel endophyte called fescues. We'll have a session. We've had a session the last 3 years in Kentucky. It'll be in Pinson this year. We have field demonstrations in classrooms. This is very, very focused training that we have with this. Chris, Tim, I was looking for a good picture. I found this from one of the proceedings. The Lanesco Max Q novel called fescue, for example, is one that Tim recently released, and they're promising that there'll be a lot of seed available this fall. They said that last year, so we're crossing our fingers, Tim, because it's great to have something both developed in University of Kentucky, but even more important than that, well adapted for farms in Kentucky. And I've just put up here the last slide. As of about 3 weeks ago, University of Kentucky will be one of the main coordinators of the International Grassland Congress in May of 2023. It will be held in Northern Kentucky. The American Forage and Grassland Council is the organization that is sponsoring it and organizing it. but many of us will be involved. In fact, I'm hoping many of you all will be involved. I'll be talking to you more as time passes. Okay, that's all I have formally. Is there any questions for Jimmy or I?
Questions?
Greg,
Yes.
and Jim, it hurts me deeply when you stand up there and say that the only good reason for forage is to feed the animals. What's your perception about the utility of forages to improve the quality of our soils and the soil resource that underlies all of agriculture today?
Very, very good point. You got me there. So I gave this kind of a simple quote to a farmer yesterday at the meeting, and I said, in general, most of our forage, particularly grasses, have about as much biomass underneath the ground as they have above the ground. Can I say that, Dave? So, that's how the Midwest U.S. prairie soils were developed under grassland. So very important, though it's hard for many farmers to plant it just for the sole benefits, but when they get the forage benefits, or maybe a cover crop in between other crops, huge benefits. And I didn't mention it all. We've done a fair bit of extension efforts in planting things like native grasses for wildlife habitat and for biomass plantings and work with that. So you're right, there's a whole other end of things with forages with that. So thanks, Mark, for bringing that up.
I have a question.
Yes, Mark.
So where are we at with the adoption of novel identified pest cure right now?
I don't have the exact numbers. So there's we figure about 5 million acres of Kentucky 31 tall fescue grown in Kentucky. And, my guesstimates of novel endophyte tall fescue fields is probably 20 to 30,000 acres. Chris, I don't know. It's hard to get exact numbers out of the companies. We do know that producers, even in the last couple of years, have been more receptive because there's been a shortage of Kentucky 31 seed, which obviously causes problems to animals. So the price of that is over $2 a pound in many cases. The novel endophyte fescue is $3.50 a pound. Orchard grass right now, due to some shortages, is about $4 a pound. So the seed of the novel fescue hasn't come down in price, but it's much easier for people saying, well, the cheaper alternative I know is worse for my cattle, it's actually not that much cheaper. So I feel like, Mike, that's helping, plus things like the seminars, to get a real uptick in the use. Hopefully, if you ask that question in 3 years or 5 years, we can be talking about hundreds of thousands of acres planted.
What's the most common cultivar in Kentucky? Novel identified right now.
It would still be Jessup Max Q. The lace field, if we get enough seed, it'll quickly become the most common because producers they know the name, they know it came from the University of Kentucky, and so they're always asking me, when can I get a hold of that? Texoma, I think, would have more sales, but they haven't moved that as much here since it was developed in Texas, Oklahoma. They've been pushing it more that way. But, Bar Optima is one that Berenberg released. It might even have more current sales than the other ones because the companies have been working harder to get the impact out there to farmers.
I thought you chose lace scale as sort of reverence. It wasn't advertising, Tim. Did you do it for the advertising factor? The sale.
Well, I know Pennington agreed to that name for the advertising value, not for the reverence to Gary. There's some of both.
Any other questions? If not, let's thank Ray.